And today, what I'd like to speak about, Jim, is two things. One, a peace plan for the area of which people call the Middle East. We call it the Southwest Asia, which will work. And it centers around water. And then second, how we're going to solve this question of the fires, the Santa Ana, the Eaton, and so forth, which are raging through California, which also involve water and so forth. So those are the two things I'd like to take up today, if that's okay with you.
Well, sure. That sounds great. And we've got these conflagrations. I guess they're both man-made, but the war in Gaza and then Israel expanding into the West Bank, not pulling its troops out of Lebanon, and of course all the saber rattling with Iran. So that really needs to be highlighted to get that under control, and then our fire. So take it away.
Okay, I'm going to. In 1994, Mr. Larouche launched something called the Oasis Plan. And we did it because the Oslo Accords occurred in 1993, and many of your listeners are going to be very familiar with them. But those were the accords where Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat met with President Clinton and set up the terms for a peace settlement, temporary peace settlement, which include that the Palestine National Authority would be set up and that it would have partial, not full control over the West Bank and Gaza. Very well intentioned. We can see right now over the last number of years, particularly with the genocide that the Israelis have carried out against the Palestinians since October 7th of 2023, that plan simply is not operative. And the problem, as you alluded to, Jim, is this, that we have a group of people, Netanyahu, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who are the security minister and the finance minister, who want to conquer the whole area. Mm-hmm. They want to conquer the West Bank. They're doing that right now in Jenin and so forth. And their policy, so they've paused in Gaza. That's decent as a start. The question we have, and this is why we're raising this plan, is how do you get enduring peace? It's good that people say we need a ceasefire and come to the peace table. That's a start. That will not generate peace, just as the Oslo Accord, however well-intentioned, and I think some of the people there were well-intentioned, it will not bring peace. And that it gets to the idea of development. If you don't have economic development, real economic development, no peace treaty anywhere will hold, because you have to provide for the welfare, the economic development of the people, their well-being, and their security. So this, which I would like to just share, I'll just show a picture of it. And so this people are going to recognize is the area where the fighting is going on, and you'll see marked the West Bank and you'll see Gaza. Now the plan is what's needed in the Middle East. Well, Israel is 70% Negev desert, and many of the areas, Egypt has desert, Jordan has desert. You need water. Water is the essence of life, both for drinking, cleaning, irrigating, and every phase of production. A car that's made requires 10,000 gallons of water to make the car and so forth. But in this area, water is possibly one of the most crucial, water and power as a start. So what we propose is the following. If you look in the southern part of the picture, below Egypt, you'll see the Gulf of Aqaba. And that Gulf of Aqaba it'll say Eliat, but I don't think people can see that very well. And you'll see Saudi Arabia. Goes up all the way. It's the Red Sea. And it will lead, we hope, to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is below the Sea of Galilee. You can see it. It's a separating part from Jordan, from Israel. I hope people can see the Dead Sea. We would take that seawater from the Gulf of Aqaba, which goes through the Red Sea, And we would put desalination plants, lots of them, along the way. And we would take the salt out of the seawater and we would produce regular water, drinking water, irrigation water, and so forth. The second part of this plan, people can probably see the Mediterranean Sea. We would take the water from the Mediterranean Sea and dig a canal which would go from the Mediterranean Sea near a little bit north of Gaza, and we would bring that also over to the Dead Sea. And we would set up desalination plants along that route as well. This could start producing billions, and in fact, up to trillions of gallons of fresh water. But let's just stick with the billions. The way we would take the salt water is different processes. Mr. Larouche believes in nuclear plants, and we would use nuclear plants. Other people may not favor that. You can use reverse osmosis. What would the water do? Well, it would irrigate the areas that have been given to Gaza and to the West Bank. We would hope that those areas would be expanded as they should be to give justice to what happened in the Nakba, where people were expelled from their territory. But it would start to build up the water that is desperately needed for drinking, for sanitation, and so forth, for hospitals which need water, for industry, and to make the deserts bloom. Now, what plan has, and this is going to sound strange, but I want to make it clear at the very beginning, not strange, but it may sound shocking. We would do this with a Palestinian-Israeli joint operation. Israel has 5 of its own desalination plants, but we would build many more. And some people are going to say, well, how can you possibly do that? Don't you know about, Netanyahu? Don't you know about what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing? They're just going and shooting young children, 3-year-olds in the heads. They show up in the hospital shot in the chest and the heads. Those aren't accidents. Those are sniper shots to kill children. I mean, it's the most brutal type of genocide you can imagine. And, 60% of all schools have been bombed and shut down. 72% of all homes have either cannot be occupied anymore or can be only partially occupied if they're rebuilt. And about 60 to 70% of all hospitals are destroyed. You want to destroy a community. You want to destroy a people. You bomb their hospitals. You bomb their schools. You bomb their homes. That's the intent, to drive them out. That's what is going on right now. So the question would be, isn't that really exceptional? You're saying they should work together. And I will just tell you why, and why we think it can happen, even though it sounds impossible at the moment. 2 reasons. Number one, if you're going to end a war and have negotiations, you have to take in the interest of the other together. We have to get the Israelis and the Arabs, we have to get Moshe and Ahmad working together so that even if they have a bitterness that exists, their children will grow up in a society where their water supply is managed by each other's side, these Arabs and the Israelis, the Palestinians and so forth, and they will have a future. And you have to promise people, not promise, realize a future. If there's no future, then you're going to have people who are completely enraged at the fact that they're put into camps, which are just open-ended prisons, open-air prisons. Now, what we do with this, and I'll just throw this out, Jim, and then you fire away. We would take, you'll see from Gaza, there's a dotted line. We want to build a highway between Gaza and the West Bank, but we want to build rail lines. We want to build power stations. If you use the hydropower of the Dead Sea, which the Sea of Jordan goes into, it falls at one point by 400 meters, which is enough to produce hydropower like we have at the Tennessee Valley Authority and so forth in the United States. You will also have these nuclear plants which can serve for double purpose to produce power. Hospitals need power, they need water. But we would provide the transportation. We would start to locate industries in there that can be built, large agricultural complexes that can be built. And the last thing I'll just say, is that we're now looking at Jordan, Israel, Egypt, and Palestine, and Lebanon and Syria to the north. But you would connect them. You would connect this area to Central Asia by high-speed rail that can go between 150 and 220 miles per hour. You would connect them with transport of shipment of goods, and you would bring in Russia, China, the neighboring countries as well, and the United States to build and rebuild and participate, although this would be a Palestinian Israeli-led policy. And I will just mention one last thing on this. We had a conference in December of last year, I think it was December 23rd, a 2-day conference the Schiller Institute did. And we had a professor, his name is Zhang Weiwei. And what he said, and he's at the Freeman Institute in China, he said China would be willing to and can participate in the entire reconstruction and the Oasis plan. And the ambassador from the Palestine National Authority to Denmark recently came out and said, we endorse this plan. So there are forces afoot, and we can make the deserts bloom. And if you did this in 10 to 15 years, and it's not the bitterness will go away immediately, you would change the outlook of people, and they would see each other as human beings. And that's critical if you're going to have a peace.
So that is intriguing. That is fabulous. You know, and if people weren't involved, I'd say, let's start. But there's a number of things that I think gets in the way. You know, we're in the United States, and of course you mentioned Larouche, and people are going to think, uh-oh, it's a cult. Look out. And then that's one thing. And so the United States support might be difficult. And then we're also in the United States where every problem looks like a nail, so we use our military industrial hammer to fix it. We don't seem to have, we no longer have the mindset of a humanitarian. Then Israel, right now the Israeli government, and I would say a lot of the populace, is insane and would rather go down in a heap themselves than help any one Palestinian. And so let's start there. What would you say?
Okay.
Start with the controversy around Lyndon LaRouche that goes
Sure.
back 40, 50 years.
That goes back, yes, it goes back 40 to 50 years. It goes back to the time that Henry Kissinger wrote a letter to then head of the FBI, William Webster, and said LaRouche must be silenced. And he was writing as a part of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, which is a board, Jim, that was set up and still exists to advise the president on foreign affairs. And others of that persuasion, you can call them neocons. We look at them as British agents, really, carrying out policies which are really not in the interest of the United States and not in the interest of the world. And you can call them the Permanent War Party as well. But from that point forward, and actually earlier when McGeorge Bundy, who's the architect, the real architect from the American side of the Vietnam War, and had the highest security clearance you could imagine, he was National Security Advisor to President Johnson, and called for the escalation against North Vietnam, the bombing campaign. He wrote the memo. He labeled Lyndon LaRouche in 1970 as a danger. We have in this country a tradition, and the tradition which I would include the four, in my view, greatest presidents: George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Abraham Lincoln, who I think is the greatest, and Franklin Roosevelt, who I have a very great affection for. And I think was a magnificent president. But others as well who were not presidents, like Martin Luther King, Benjamin Franklin. It's a tradition that we believe in a constitutional republic, small r, not Republican Party, but a republic, in which not only all men are created equal, and all are potential geniuses, I will add that, but we have a general welfare. And it's in our preamble of the Constitution. People don't read the preamble that much. And to promote the general welfare. And the general welfare has led to great projects. I know you live in Tennessee. Look at the Tennessee Valley Authority, which used to rage with water and couldn't be controlled and rip off the topsoil, the rich topsoil, and inundate people and so forth. And then we said we're going to create the Tennessee Valley Authority over much resistance from the Morgan interests and the others. And we built it, and we not only did that, but we were able to get power from it and let farms grow, built manufacturing and so forth. We've had this tradition going back to when we built the Transcontinental Railroad, which was Lincoln's administration, and he played a huge role in the fact that that happened. So we in Larouche movement are part of that tradition, and a greater tradition, which I would just cite the people may not know them, but Nicholas of Cusa, who helped his thinking, helped bring about the end to the treaty with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, where there was this terrible Protestant Catholic religious war, which seemed, Jim, it would never end. And it was brutal. People were picking up stones and cracking them against the heads of others if they didn't have weapons. It got down to that level. And people, the depopulation of European cities was about 25%. And they finally came together and said, we have to serve the interest of the other. That's the terms of the Peace of Westphalia. And Westphalia established all modern governments, not only America, where you started moving toward the interest of the population, not of the king or the ruler. That is the tradition of Larouche. And the belief that we can go to the moon, that we can change mankind, that we can control the fusion power, that's our outlook. It freaked everyone out, left, right, center, because they had gotten into ideologies and slogans. And we were not a slogan. So we were called CIA. We were also called KGB. Figure that out. Because people got angry when we said to them, think in terms of development, like this plan right on this screen. Think of this as an alternative. No. We got to do this. We got to get the bombs out. We got to. And so since we could not be put into a box, and since Mr. Larouche's ideas proved valid time and time and time again, they said, all right, he's a cult. What's the proof? He's a cult. Don't ask. He's a cult. Is this plan the plan of a cult? I mean, it was the CIA and the FBI and others went after us in the most incredible way. And we won elections. We won the lieutenant governor election in the state of Illinois. We won it in the Democratic primary, over 300,000 votes. That made it even worse for them because they always said we don't have any support. So there are many things, but I say the idea that man is perfectible. He is not a beast. He's not to be culled like the population people want to do. He is not an animal, but he's got reason and a quality of reason which he imparts to the next generation. That thought freaks out the enemy like nothing you've ever seen.
Exactly. And I'll give a more recent example. Bernie Sanders, who had just humanitarian ideas and, wanted to address climate change, wanted to address the health industry, wanted to address militarism. And of course, he's still vilified. It's so strange that somebody who actually stands up and wants to do something and has an idea. So, but, all I can say is welcome.
Just one thing on Sanders. Look, there was a conspiracy inside the Democratic Party. He was winning elections.
Yep.
And the Clinton forces, whatever you want to say about them, I thought they did something really evil, and they organized the campaign get Sanders in the Democratic Party, very much like they organized against us. It's possible, and I have different views of different things that Sanders said, that he would have won the election had there been a genuine, open election, and that had they not mobilized all the super delegates and said, you're going to vote this way, and Sanders ain't going to get the Democratic nomination.
Right. Great. So with all of that, with our ability to manipulate and undermine in this country, with the corporations and the media and the current political structure, is it possible that this plan could be advanced towards a reasonable Israel and a Palestinian populace through China or Russia? In other words, exclude the United States.
I will say this much. They have some interest, and they're decent. People don't know, in the press, it's Russia, 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 China, China, China. They're our enemies. I would think we have to really look at who Russia and China are. I see myself as an American, but I'm just saying, I think some of that stuff is just crazy. I'll add one element of the difficulty that you've added, and I'll tell you why I think we need America. I do think we need America. Look, Biden and the Secretary of State Blinken were horrendous. The bombs were coming from America. Trump has told Netanyahu, you're going to do a ceasefire. Netanyahu wasn't going to do it. On the other hand, if you look at Trump's plan and what was in the Abraham Accords when he was president from 2017 to 2021, they're not good at all. And he wants, at least some faction in his party, wants to go to war against Iran, which would mean a global nuclear war, and no one will survive it. No one will survive a global nuclear war. All you need is each side to launch 10 missiles on each side, and the following nuclear winter will wipe out a good part of the human race. So I'm going to make it a higher degree of difficulty. How are we going to get America? I would say in Israel, and I'm not an Israeli, I can't influence the elections, but this Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, radical, destroy everything Palestinian, really. There are Israelis, we've had them on our program, the International Peace Coalition, who are up in arms against this. And they can be mobilized. You might say, well, they'll never come to power. In the United States, there are reasonable people like yourself and many others. And for this to endure, if it was just the China, Russia, Palestinian, it won't work. You've got to get the major participants in this world to sit down at the table. I know that Putin and Trump, and I know he's a very, I'll just say, very controversial, very unpredictable. That's an understatement. But he has said that he wants to meet with Xi Jinping. It's in the public press. It was reported by Politico. He wants to meet with Putin. Part of that would be to end the war in Ukraine. But they may say to him, look, you think you're just going to go do certain things. We have a different view. If we can get this Oasis plan, and let me just tell you, we've taken this almost every office in the U.S. Congress. We've gone into their offices, give them packets, asked to speak to the chief aide, and so forth. It's a fight. We don't have this won by any stretch. But if we can shift in an environment where groups like the BRICS and others are coming to the fore, and it's not going to be a unipolar world anymore, where the United States or the British Americans say everything and everyone just dances to their tune. That could be a paradigm shift, an epochal shift. Small margin? Yes. The necessary thing to do for survival of mankind and avert a nuclear war and develop this region? Yes.
I was just thinking there's another major player right in the region, and Turkey. Would this plan involve Turkey, because Turkey, I think, is more influential than people are admitting in the West right now. Um, and 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 Trump likes Erdogan, I think. And so, I mean, sneak it around the outside, and get Turkey on board.
There's a group. Erdogan's a very interesting thing. Some people say he's trying to reconstruct a greater Ottoman Empire again. There may be small grains of truth to that, but he's also been when he spoke at the UN, he probably had the strongest speech I have heard of anyone on what was going on. He said the Israeli leadership is fascist, and he didn't hold back. He put. I mean, I looked at the speech because I wrote a piece for what we call our briefing on that to report it. The question is this. There's another force in the world. I'll just try and introduce this to your listeners very quickly. It's called the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it started just 5 countries, but it has now grown. It has 11 members and 8 partners. So it's 19 countries. And it includes 7 out of the 10 most populous countries in the world. It also includes Indonesia, which just joined, and other countries which are part of this process of joining. Indonesia is the 4th most populous country in the world. It has over half the world's production. They have had sanctions from the U.S., very, very nasty sanctions, trying to cripple their economies. And I'm not just talking about Russia and China, which are being sanctioned like crazy, but they have sanctions where they don't even let them do this or do that. And they're putting together an alternative economic system based on development and the equality of every nation, no matter how small, even if it's as small as a country like Panama, or even smaller like a country and so forth, that every nation is sovereign and you have to respect their sovereignty. And they're going to have a say in this. And I think, to answer your question about Erdogan is courting himself. They've asked to join the BRICS. They are trying to move. I mean, he also has his opportunistic side, but they are trying to move to bring that force to bear. Erdogan's consciously trying to bring some of those forces to bear to shift the balance of power. I don't know how Trump will react. He's got a few ways he could react. He could react in a crazy way and just say, I'll bomb you all. If he does that, it's a very, very disastrous development. He could also say, I have to orient to reality. And the reality is the world is moving away from the dollar, not because they want to, because if you use trading dollars, you'll get sanctioned. They're moving towards a high technology development. And I just want to say one thing. People may not know this because the media doesn't report very much of anything that's important. On December 26th, people will be familiar with the Three Gorges Dam. It's the biggest hydropower project in the world. It produces 100 million installed 100 gigawatts, million installed gigawatts of power. They announced, China, that they're going to build in the river that becomes the Brahmaputra in India, but it's further up in Tibet and so forth. They're going to build something 3 times the size. It's going to be 300 gigawatts. I shouldn't say million. 300 gigawatts. Gigawatts is billion watts. So 300 billion watts. They're going to do it. They build water projects.
Mm-hmm.
India builds water projects. We've been working on trying to get water projects in Afghanistan. America knew how to do this. California, which we'll discuss in a second, Los Angeles and San Diego exist because of water projects that were built by Edmund Pat Brown, who was the father of Jerry Brown. He built them when he was governor. Water can be done. It's a matter of willpower and morality.
Clearly. So, okay, what would you have people that are listening do?
We have the third thing, if people can see this, there's a video, and I don't know how many people use these codes, but if they do, but you can get it. You just put Larouche Oasis plan. I would say if we can mobilize and get people to watch this, but call the senator, call their 2 senators, call their congressman, and say, we need a peace that's going to endure. Because we don't even know how long this will last. Maybe after this peace plan, the ceasefire is 3 phases. Maybe after the first phase, Netanyahu would say, that's it. We're going back to where we were. Who's going to stand up to him? We have to shift people's thinking, not just locally, globally. There are forces out there like the BRICS. There are forces in other countries. If we can bring America to do that and flood the lines. Now, people may say, well, I don't know. I call my congressman, I got a recording. Those recordings count. We've gone and given packets to everyone. We've got to say we need a genuine peace. Yes, a treaty, but treaties without development will not work. And I just want to read you one quote, which Ron sent to me. This is from something that Lyndon Larouche said, and I think it gives you a sense of what we're trying to do, because we're trying to change people's thinking with the Oasis plan, not just a plan. It's a good plan. And this is what he said when he was discussing this in another capital. He said, in this case, I propose we drop the sociological or often accepted sociological view of negotiators and grand politics. You know, everybody believes everything's done by this negotiator and that Secretary of State and so forth. He said, I propose that not only the material, but the psychological effect of development upon the state of the individual mind, and he's talking about Palestinians and Israelis, and the whole world, is the key to peaceful development of this planet in the coming period. We have been worse than a failure. For example, I know intimately most of the countries in Central and South America, because he went there many places, and I can assure you that in these countries, those sociological methods which are used against these people have been proven to be worse than nothing. So we're going to break the psychology that people think that this is going to be a war for 30 years, 50 years, at 100 years, and that no one can end it. It's very important that we show people there is a way to end it, a way that is rational, based on what you would call American methods. We've proven them in our country.
Excellent. Well, we will definitely share it, and I hope it catches. I hope it takes off. I hope the idea takes off, and hopefully, my hope would be that you have young people listening to this, because they're the group that right now are open-minded enough to say, yeah, let's make it happen.